Who else could be on the move for the Raptors ahead of the trade deadline as we take a look back at Marc Gasol's time in Toronto? Hey everyone, welcome to Inside the Raptors. Rob Wong joined alongside by Ryan Wolstat of the Toronto SUN. And Ryan, the NBA trade deadline is a week away, February 8th. The Raptors, of course, have done a lot of their heavy lifting with the trades of OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam so far, but there are still some interesting pieces that could be on the move. Who do you think is most likely to be with a new team after February 8th?
Well, the Raptors have a lot of options here. They're in actually a good spot because there isn't a ton of maybe not as much talent on the market as in other years. There just doesn't seem to be. For one thing, there aren't like those huge superstar names that sometimes you see. But even like the on the role player department, there's not a ton. So the Raptors are lucky enough to have a bunch of role players. Bruce Brown would be at the top of the list. As soon as they acquired him, I was told that they had an offer of a first-round pick in 2024 on the table. That didn't interest them too much because they already got two from Indiana in the Pascal Siakam trade, and they have a high second round, and this draft isn't supposed to be that good. So I think if a team comes calling with a pick in 2025 or 2026, then that would really get them interested. And they also have a bunch of pieces that can help match salaries. Thaddeus Young's expiring contract could have some value. Otto Porter as well. I mean, could be a team that is looking to get off some salary next year that would take on those expiring contracts for it and maybe give a second rounder or two in exchange. I also think Chris Boucher is going to have a new home as long as there is a trade that works. I mean, he has a bit of money on his contract for next year. That complicates it a bit, but I do think he could help a team with his energy. And so I think he'll be on the move. I think Bruce Brown most likely will be on the move, but the Raptors really love him, and he's really looked really good as a Raptor, and you do need good players. So there is a small chance, I think, that they keep him and maybe move him in the future because they have the option to pick him up next year, which they would if they kept him. But yeah, those would be the main guys. And I think Gary Trent is an interesting case. Gary Trent Jr., he opted into his contract last year, which was a big surprise because you would have thought he would get a new long-term deal, and he actually has had a pretty bad season. So it seems like he's cost himself a bunch of money by opting in instead of getting a deal last summer. But then again, he's raised his three-point value, his average every month, and he was up to over 50% in January. So I think that's going to get some teams interested. He's a guy that can help a team. And again, like Brown, he's a guy that maybe could help in the future here on a team that really lacks shooting. So he could go either way. But so if I was kind of wagering a betting man on these things, I'd say Boucher for sure. One of the veterans in Thad Young or Porter. And I think it's more likely than not that Brown goes, and Trent, I think it's about 50-50.
All right. Well, the Raptors might have 9 guys on the roster after the trade deadline, depending on what comes back in return. Speaking of the trade deadline, of course, it was 5 years ago, February 7th, when the Raptors acquired Marc Gasol from the Memphis Grizzlies in a trade that would really transform their team and help them, of course, to their first and only NBA championship. But Gasol calling it quits, hanging up the sneakers after 20 years in pro basketball. Ryan, what are your memories about Gasol, who wasn't here for a long time, but was definitely here for a good time?
Well, like his brother Pau Gasol, just an awesome dude, first of all. Like two of the best people I've seen in the NBA. I've come across, all their charitable work, like the stuff they do, just how down to earth they are, despite being like star professional athletes. So great guy, came in with no ego. He didn't start right away, even though he'd been a starter his whole career, had no issues with that. Then he did start and everything was good. Unselfish almost to a fault at times. I remember Nick Nurse like prodding him, shoot the ball, you can do it. We need you to space the floor. But just a perfect fit, exactly what they needed. Like Jonas Valanciunas was also a great dude, a very, very talented offensive player, a beast in the paint, but he had some limitations, and Gasol came in and just solved the rest of the problems. That was a very talented team, but what it needed was that kind of defensive anchor in the middle who was just going to lock things down. And that's exactly what he did. When they got to the playoffs, Nikola Vucevic, an all-star center then for Orlando, looked like he had no idea what he was doing. He looked like a kid. Like Gasol just totally outplayed him, made him a complete non-factor. The Raptors won easily in 5 games. And then the next round, Joel Embiid wasn't quite the guy that we see now, but he was pretty darn good. Like he was already like almost a 30-point scorer, really, really good. And he just, for most of that series, he was completely flummoxed by Gasol to the point that he was in his own head and he was like crying when Kawhi hit that crazy shot like at the end, and he couldn't believe what Gasol had done to him. And even when Gasol struggled at times against Golden State or Milwaukee, he also had some huge moments. And I think people forget just how important a piece of that championship team he was, mostly because of the defense, but also because of his ability to space the floor and just his amazing passing ability. So he came to the Raptors at a perfect time. It would have been nice. The next year, if COVID never happened, they had a shot at repeating, and he was starting to fade by then, and then that was pretty much it. But, I'm glad that that we had a chance to see him up close, and I don't think the Raptors win that title without him.
No, they definitely do not. One of the more memorable runs for a Raptor, of course, in franchise history. As always, you can leave your Raptors thoughts in the comments section below or send us an email at torontoraptors@postmedia.com. For Ryan Wolstat, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.